We're here with Carol Canavan, who is the co-president of the Canton League of Women Voters. And first of all, Stark County Political Report thanks you individually in your capacity as co-president and also the league itself for sponsoring this event today.
Thank you. We're glad to do it.
And you were here the whole session. What's your assessment of how it transpired?
Yeah, I was very pleased. We are always concerned about being nonpartisan, and this effort is obviously not political. We are trying to make sure that every voter has an opportunity to exercise their right as a citizen of this great country. I think we've seen some degradation of polling places and of opportunities for people to vote, and some voter suppression. So we're all about trying to help make sure people can exercise their democratic rights.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having an assessment for the Stark County Political Report.
You bet.
Here today with Mike Brickner with an organization called All Voting is Local. So explain to us what that organization is about.
Sure. So we're a new nationwide campaign that was launched in 2018. We're housed at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and we have four different organizations that support us: the American Constitution Society, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, the Campaign Legal Center, and the ACLU. And we work to help solve problems on the local level that voters experience, and we do that proactively and ensure that every voter can have their voice heard.
How did you find your way to Canton, Ohio today?
Well, so we actually were invited by the League of Women Voters here in the greater Canton area, and this really arose from a legislative fight that we had in Columbus several months ago. We had fought a piece of legislation that would allow boards of elections to reduce the number of poll workers in polling locations, and we fought that bill. After the General Assembly passed it, one of the activists from the League of Women Voters who was really concerned about it said, "Oh, we need you to come to Canton and talk about how we individual activists can work to make sure that elections are run fairly and that every voter can cast their ballot."
Well, do you have an assessment of the quality of elections and Board of Elections and Secretary of State's office here in Ohio?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've worked on voting rights for over 15 years now in Ohio, and one thing that I do really appreciate is that having been through many different fights over the years over voting rights, is that we are at a place where I think many election officials and our Secretary of State are really trying to ensure that people can cast a ballot and that the system is fair. Oftentimes we still fall short of that for some people, but I oftentimes find that that's due to a lack of resources or just the constant strain of elections, that it is not easy to put on elections, and that there's a role for we activists and we nonpartisan groups to help to make sure that the system runs well. And so really we're here to be partners with the election officials, with our elected officials and other government entities here in Canton or anywhere else in Ohio, to ensure that we can help to make sure that elections are run smoothly and that voters don't encounter problems when they go to vote.
As you noted in your presentation, Ohio has a bipartisan election system structure. Is that typical across the country, or are there different models that might be a better model?
There are different models throughout the country. The bipartisan systems are in other states as well. Some states have nonpartisan people who serve on the Board of Elections. Other places don't necessarily have a formal board, but they might have like a supervisor of elections who sort of runs things, similar to how our director of a board of elections works, but without like a supervising board. So there are different models out there. I do really value that we have a strong history of bipartisan cooperation in Ohio. I think that oftentimes helps to ensure that boards of elections and election officials work in a way that benefits all voters, because you ensure that there are at least representatives from the two major political parties. And as we talked about today, there are ways for people who are nonpartisan or with a third party to get involved too. You can work for a board of elections, you can serve as a poll worker. So I think that there are ways for other people to get involved too.
Recently Ohio did a purge of the voter rolls. Do you have a viewpoint on that?
I do have a viewpoint. I was one of the advocates working very hard to ensure that voters were not wrongfully removed from the rolls. In my career, I've seen many different voter purges, and the difference for this past one, and I think where Secretary LaRose should get some credit, is that it was the first time that we actually saw the list of people to be purged before the purge happened. That one of the problems with past purges has been that it has been sort of shrouded in secrecy, that no one knew who was on the purge list, how they got there, and saw it ahead of time. But the issue with this past purge was that there was some transparency, but that also then illuminated some of the kind of basic problems with how the state does the purge. So we have 88 counties in the state of Ohio. Every single county has a little bit different of a process and does it in a little bit different of a way. And so what we started to see is that there were counties that had errors either because of things that board staff did or vendors did, where voters were wrongfully put on the rolls. The other problem with the purge, and this is what advocates argued in the U.S. Supreme Court and otherwise, we've said that the purge is supposed to remove people who have been inactive, and that is supposed to sort of be a proxy for people who to estimate when somebody is no longer eligible. That the idea is, well, if a person hasn't voted in 6 years, then chances are high that they've moved or they've died and that they are probably ineligible otherwise. What we saw from this last purge, and we had 40,000 people, I believe, who ended up being removed from the final purge list versus what started on the list, is that there were...
It was over 200,000 originally, right?
Right, there were 235,000. Okay. We ended up purging around 195,000 people. And so we saw tens of thousands of people who raised their hand and said, wait, I still live in Ohio, I'm still alive, and I still wish to vote. And so it sort of illustrated that the purge process was actually not a very good way to find ineligible voters, that it led to people who otherwise should be eligible voters to be removed from the rolls.
Okay, final question. You're in Canton today. I'm sure you've been many other places doing the same thing. How would you gauge what happened in Canton today in your interaction with the attendees with what you typically get?
It was really exciting to be here with the activists here in Canton. Many of them reported having great interactions with their elections officials, and other people expressed that they've had issues in past elections too. I think what is really great is that you had a lot of enthusiasm from many different people who wanted to be part of the action and to help to make sure that our elections work for everyone. And that's really the biggest thing, is that, a lot of this isn't just about, calling out bad behavior by elected officials or election officials, but it's about finding solutions for problems that impact voters and making sure that we're doing elections in a free and fair way. And I think the activists here were really enthusiastic and engaged and wanted to be part of the solution.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike Brickner. All voting is local.
All right, thank you very much.